The tape measure slid from my fingers the second I saw the name, Catherine Beckman, typed in the neat cursive of the online appointment form, right under the groom's last name field, Monroe. My fiancé's last name. The same Monroe that I'd been engaged to for 6 months. The same Daniel Monroe whose family still wouldn't look me in the eye when I dropped off cupcakes at their lake house for his mother's birthday. At first, I thought it was a typo. A coincidence, maybe? Monroe wasn't exactly rare. But then I opened the dress file. One photo. A woman in the gown I had personally altered last week, grinning in a way that made her look like she knew she'd already won. I recognized the room behind her. Daniel's mother's sitting room. The same velvet curtains, the same ugly crystal figurine of a poodle on the mantel. My breath snagged, and for a second, I genuinely thought I might pass out over my workbench, still holding a pincushion. The email confirmation was even worse. Bride, Catherine. Groom, Daniel Monroe. Final fitting scheduled for Friday. Friday was supposed to be the day Daniel and I went cake tasting. Now I realized it was probably the day he planned to vanish. Please pause and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where something seemed off, but everyone around you acted like you were crazy for noticing? Also, where are you watching this from? We love hearing from viewers all over the world. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one of our stories. I promise you, this one's going to leave your heart racing. Anyway, let me back up. My name's Leah Emerson, and I was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, in a little shotgun house that always smelled like jasmine tea and lemon oil. My mama was a seamstress, and I guess I followed right in her footsteps. I ran her bridal alteration shop after she passed. It's not glamorous, but there's something sacred about making a woman feel beautiful on her wedding day. I never imagined I'd be sewing the dress for my own fiancé's other bride. But that was the day fate knocked. And trust me, when I opened the door, it wasn't with a smile. It was with a seam ripper in one hand and a question burning in my throat. Who the hell is Catherine Beckman? I didn't sleep that night. I lay there with the taste of metal in my mouth, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slow circles above me like it had answers. Every few hours, I'd reach for my phone and scroll through the screenshots I'd taken. Catherine's appointment confirmation, her beaming in the mirror, wearing the same dress I'd hand-stitched lace onto just days before. And the kicker, the venue address at the bottom of the client record. The Haven at Bloomfield Ridge, a luxury estate that only old money people around here could afford. I'd passed by it once, years ago, when I was delivering bridesmaid dresses. The gate alone probably cost more than my car. At 7:03 a.m., I opened the shop. I couldn't sit at home. I needed thread in my hands, or I was going to lose my mind. But no amount of stitching or steam pressing could quiet the voice in my head. He played you. He played you. And now he's dressing it up in silk and white wine. When I finally texted Daniel, just a casual, "Hey, can we talk tonight? Something weird popped up at the shop." He replied almost instantly, "Busy. Long surgeries this week. What's up?" Surgeries. Always the surgeries. I almost laughed. The man was a plastic surgeon. It's not like he was harvesting organs. But I said nothing, because suddenly, I didn't want him to know I knew. Not yet. I wanted to see how far he'd go with the lies. I wanted him to squirm. Still, There's nothing lonelier than lying beside someone whose entire mouth tastes like secrets. 2 days later, I got my answer in the most brutal way possible. A client came in for her appointment, and while flipping through the bridal lookbook I'd put together, she stopped on a fabric sample and casually said, "Oh, Catherine Beckman had something like this, didn't she? I saw her and Daniel Monroe in the society column last week. Such a gorgeous couple. She's marrying into the Monroe family. I heard his mother's thrilled this time." I froze, smile plastered, heart crashing. This time. Meaning, not with me. Somehow, this complete stranger knew more about my own engagement than I did. I smiled through the rest of that appointment, even though every pin I inserted felt like I was stitching through my own ribs. When she left, I locked the door and finally let myself cry. Not dainty, controlled crying. No, it was ugly. Snot, gasps, that raw hiccuping sound you make when your body can't process betrayal fast enough. I had loved Daniel. I had believed him when he said his family's coldness was just their way. I had chalked up his mother's refusal to use my name at dinner, always calling me the dress girl, to generational blindness. I even defended him to my cousin when he missed our engagement photo session because his schedule was unpredictable. But what I didn't know then was that Daniel Monroe didn't just forget to protect me. He chose to erase me, slowly, methodically, and I let him, because I thought patience would eventually earn me a seat at their table. That night, I drove to the Monroe house. Not the main one at Bloomfield Ridge, but the guest cottage Daniel sometimes used when he worked late. My name was still on the gate access file, so I punched in the code like muscle memory. I didn't even know what I wanted to say. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just wanted to see him, to look in his eyes and watch him lie. I pulled into the gravel driveway just as his mother, Diane Monroe, stepped out of a black Escalade. Her pearls glistened in the low porch light, and her cardigan was pressed so stiff it looked like it had never been worn by a real person. She didn't flinch when she saw me. In fact, she smiled. "Leah," she said, voice like chilled syrup. "Still playing shop, girl?" I could have slapped her. Instead, I smiled. "Just coming to see Daniel. Is he here?" She tilted her head, eyes flicking to my worn-out ballet flats, then back to my face. "He's busy preparing for the next chapter of his life. I hope you find your own someday." Then she opened the door, walked in, and closed it in my face. I stood there for a long time, long enough for the porch light to buzz, for the crickets to stop chirping, for my pulse to slow into something more solid. I had seen humiliation before, childhood teasing, gossip from other vendors when I couldn't afford to advertise like the chain stores. But this was systemic. This was premeditated. And for the first time, it hit me. They never intended to keep me. I was just the quiet, hard-working placeholder until Catherine Beckman came along. Catherine, with her family name etched into courthouse plaques. Catherine, who probably never had to explain why she didn't go to college because her mom had cancer. Catherine, who got the ring, the venue, the dress. My dress. But if they thought I was going to disappear quietly, they'd clearly never had a seamstress walk in during the middle of a final fitting, with a look in her eyes sharp enough to cut through silk. Because something shifted in me that night, right there on that perfect porch, with its symmetrical potted ferns and monogrammed welcome mat. I wasn't going to beg for closure. I wasn't going to scream or post cryptic things online or cry to mutual friends. No. I was going to stitch together the truth, thread by thread, until the whole damn lie unraveled at their feet. And when it did, I'd make sure every pin, every secret, every second they tried to bury me was seen. By everyone, especially Catherine Beckman. The first thing I did was stop deleting things. Every text, every email, every appointment confirmation. Suddenly, it all felt like evidence. I downloaded every voicemail Daniel had ever left me from the past year and backed them up twice. Once to a thumb drive I hid in a mint tin under the shop's floorboards, and once to the cloud under a dummy folder called tax receipts. I wasn't sure what I was building yet, but I knew I needed to build it. And quietly, because one wrong move and Diane Monroe would smell it. That woman had the kind of instincts you don't inherit. You cultivate them in salons and at silent auctions where fake smiles hide knives. I knew if I wanted to win, I had to stop thinking like a fiancé and start thinking like the thing they feared most. A woman with nothing left to lose. It started with a call. Not to Daniel, not to his sister who never bothered learning how to pronounce my name, but to Eli Harper, my childhood friend, occasional wedding videographer, and the only person I knew who could sneak into a room full of millionaires and leave with the memory card untouched. I hadn't talked to him in months, ever since he confessed that he thought Daniel was too shiny to be real. And I shut the conversation down. But when I called, he picked up on the first ring. "Leah?" he said, like he'd just been waiting for the moment. "Is this about Daniel?" I didn't ask how he knew. I just said, "Meet me at the shop. Bring your cameras." By the time Eli showed up an hour later, I had already printed out a timeline. Every interaction, every suspicious gap in Daniel's schedule, including the medical conference that just so happened to line up with the wedding venue's final walkthrough. Eli brought coffee and that look in his eye he used to get in high school when he was setting up a drone camera to spy on the rich kids' pool parties. "You're planning something, Emerson," he said, grinning. "What's the move?" I showed him the screenshots. "They're getting married in 2 weeks. The venue is the Haven at Bloomfield Ridge. She's a Beckman." He whistled low. "Of those Beckmans?" I nodded, and I altered her damn wedding dress. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Okay, you want to blow up a wedding?" "I want to tell the truth," I replied, loudly. The next few days were a blur of coffee-fueled nights, silent fury, and whispered strategy sessions between fittings. I still had clients. I still had a business. But every veil I steamed, every zipper I closed, reminded me that I'd been building other people's happily ever afters, while mine was being written over like a draft no one bothered to save. Eli started digging. Turns out, Daniel had been moving carefully, but not smartly. One look through the Monroe family's event planner's Instagram showed a blurred RSVP list laid out on a desk. Eli zoomed in and enhanced it frame by frame until we saw Catherine plus Daniel printed at the top and several Savannah officials and hospital board members listed underneath. "They're not just marrying her off," Eli said. "They're selling him to her world like a branded product. This isn't about love. It's a merger." That hurt more than I expected. Because somewhere, in spite of it all, I'd still hoped that maybe, Daniel was conflicted. That maybe he was pressured. But Eli's tone didn't carry hope, only certainty. "You were never meant to stay, Leah," he said quietly. "You were the placeholder." And there it was again, That word. Placeholder. Fill in. Stand in. Like all my memories had been understudies in a play that had already been cast. We knew if we wanted to make impact, we needed proof. Legal proof. So Eli reached out to a friend of his who worked tech security at the Haven. Turns out, the guy owed Eli a favor from a very messy wedding years ago involving a dropped camera and a vengeful mother of the bride. We didn't ask too many questions, but what we did get was valuable. An access schedule showing Daniel had visited the venue twice with Catherine under a private reservation block. Both times on weekends, he told me he was volunteering out of town. The paper trail was forming. We printed it, time-stamped everything, and stored copies in 3 separate places. Meanwhile, I played my part. I texted Daniel in the evenings. Miss you? How was your day? Picked up a new sample cake we might want to try for the wedding. He responded every time, polite, controlled, a little distant, but never suspicious. Not once did he ask what I'd been up to. I realized then how easy it was to deceive someone who had convinced themselves you weren't smart enough to suspect a thing. Then, something unexpected happened. A box arrived at the shop, no name on the sender label. Inside was a thank you card with a gold-embossed C on the front and a message that read, "Appreciate the custom lacework. The dress is stunning. Couldn't have done it without you. C." Tucked inside the envelope was a check, $2,000. My hands shook, not from gratitude, from rage. She knew. Catherine knew who I was, knew what she was doing, and she paid me like I was a hotel bellhop handing over lost luggage. That was the moment I decided this wouldn't just be about truth. It would be about consequences. I looked at Eli across the shop, held up the card, and said, "I want to give her this back." "How?" he asked. "At the wedding," I said, "while she's walking down the aisle." He blinked and then slowly, a grin spread across his face. "Savannah's never seen a wedding like the one you're about to crash." The first crack in my plan came wrapped in lavender cardstock and laced with venom. A formal cease and desist letter arrived at the shop, couriered, not mailed, with my full name printed in block letters. The sender? Beckman and Fielding, Catherine's family law firm. The message was sharp, legalistic, and cold. Any interference with the upcoming private event between Miss Catherine Beckman and Dr. Daniel Monroe will be met with immediate legal action, including charges of harassment, defamation, and breach of professional confidentiality. They even cited the clause in my client agreement about discretion during custom work. It was signed, hand-signed, by Catherine's father, Judge Wallace Beckman, in thick blue ink like a threat dressed as a signature. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it in the evidence box under intimidation. They knew, I knew, and they weren't trying to hide anymore. They were trying to frighten me silent. Eli was furious. He wanted to go straight to the press, leak everything. "Let's put their whole empire on blast, Leah," he said. "They're cornered. That's why they're biting." But I shook my head. Too soon. If we go loud now, they'll twist it. Call me unstable, vindictive. That's the narrative they're building. Because it wasn't just the letter. The very next day, a boutique downtown canceled our joint trunk show, a showcase I'd been planning for months. The owner, who once raved about my lacework, left me a vague voicemail. "We're heading in a different direction, brand-wise. Hope you understand." I did. The Monroes had whispered in enough ears to make my name taste sour in this town. A few more days like this, and my business would start hemorrhaging clients. But the worst blow didn't come from the Monroes or the Beckmans. It came from someone I trusted. Her name was Alyssa, one of my junior seamstresses. Barely 22, fresh out of design school, I trained her myself. She helped with fittings, pressed gowns, and stayed late when I needed her. I never once questioned her loyalty, until I caught her taking pictures of our wedding prep notes with her phone. She claimed it was for her portfolio, but the second I asked to see her message threads, she froze. I didn't need to scroll far. There it was. A string of texts with a contact saved as DM. My stomach dropped. Daniel. He'd gotten to her, promised her a job with Catherine's design team in Atlanta. She was feeding him updates, my schedule, my conversations with Eli, even screenshots of the Beckman thank you card. I asked her to leave without raising my voice. I told her I hoped it was worth it. She didn't look back. That night, I sat in my darkened shop and wondered if I was strong enough to finish this. For every step forward, someone was cutting a thread behind me. Daniel wasn't just replacing me. He was systematically scrubbing me. His mother was the same. A client confided that Diane Monroe had recently donated a sizable sum to the local art council, on the condition that my name be removed from their upcoming bridal art installation. My photo, once featured in the promotional flyer, vanished from the website overnight. That was the moment I stopped mourning the relationship and started mourning who I used to be. The woman who thought these people just needed time to accept her. Eli found me crying in the fitting room, my head against a mannequin's shoulder like it was the only thing still standing. He sat beside me, handed me a bottle of ginger ale like we were back in high school during flu season, and said, "If you walk away now, you're proving them right." I looked at him. "They've already won, Eli. Look at what they've done in 2 days. I'm barely holding on." He leaned forward. "That's because they're afraid. Do you understand that? Diane Monroe doesn't lift a finger unless she smells threat. Catherine's family isn't lawyering up because they're confident. They're shaking, and they should be." He was right. Fear doesn't bark unless it senses something coming. We made adjustments. We encrypted everything. Eli showed me how to password protect folders, rename files, and use a secure drive that even I barely understood. We changed the wedding day plan from a direct confrontation to something subtler, more explosive. Eli used his network to get us on the vendor list through a florist assistant position. Easy to blend in. Minimal attention. His camera setup would look like just another wedding film crew. I'd wear a staff lanyard, carry a garment bag, and stay in motion until the moment came. But before I left that night, I did one last thing. I walked into my childhood bedroom above the shop, now dusty and lined with bolts of forgotten fabric, and pulled out the lace handkerchief my mother had sewn the year she died. It was delicate, a little frayed, but strong. Just like her. Just like I'd have to be. Because they could cut off my income, blacklist me from events, even turn my own staff against me. But they had made one critical mistake. They forgot seamstresses know how to mend what others tried to destroy. The day of the wedding dawned in a colorless hush, the kind of low-hanging fog Savannah gets before a thunderstorm. I stood in front of my shop's cracked mirror, in a florist assistant's uniform, a crisp black jumpsuit, neutral makeup, hair pinned tight beneath a simple cap. Nothing about me looked extraordinary. And that was the point. Ordinary women aren't threats. Ordinary women are invisible. But I wasn't invisible. Not today. Today, I was the fuse. Eli picked me up in a battered blue van with sage and vine floral, magnetic logos slapped on both sides. He wore a matching uniform, camera gear hidden in plain sight, beneath silk garlands and labeled vases. "You good?" he asked, eyes flicking toward me. "Ask me after," I whispered. My heart wasn't racing. It was drumming low, heavy, like it was pacing before a fight. As we pulled through the iron gates of the Haven at Bloomfield Ridge, I saw the chandeliers glowing through the glass reception hall and the white folding chairs lining the garden aisle like toy soldiers awaiting instruction. Soft string music drifted from somewhere in the hedges. The whole place smelled like roses and polished money. We passed security with no issue. Our vendor passes had been added by Eli's contact the day before. Floral refresh for the ceremony aisle, Eli told the clipboard-wielding woman at the staff tent. She waved us through. I wanted to laugh. They'd spent weeks building an iron wall of exclusivity and intimidation. And I'd walked right through it wearing a fake name tag and a bouquet in my arms. Inside, the scene was dripping in curated perfection. Crystal lanterns swung from wrought iron hooks. The aisle runner was a literal carpet of blush petals. And standing at the altar in a tuxedo with smug precision was Daniel Monroe, the man who once held my hand during my mother's funeral, who called me his safe place, who had told me I made him feel real. He looked polished, smiling, clapping his groomsmen on the back like he wasn't committing emotional fraud in front of 100 people. I scanned the crowd. There they were. Judge Beckman in the front row, spine stiff and proud. Diane Monroe, draped in silk champagne like a serpent in pearls. She clutched a tissue and dabbed her eyes, already playing the part of teary mother-in-law to royalty. Then the music shifted. A hush rippled through the crowd, like the wind before a door slams. The bridal march began. I moved. Eli slipped away to the back of the tent where his cameras were set up, each one already rolling. I walked toward the altar, weaving through the back row of guests, keeping my head low. As Catherine Beckman emerged from the hedges, slow-stepping in a white gown I had pressed with my own hands, I reached into my garment bag and pulled out the envelope. Inside it were copies of the finalized RSVP list with Daniel's name and mine, dated 2 weeks after he proposed to me. Email correspondence between Judge Beckman and Diane Monroe, referring to me as the temporary seamstress fiancé, and instructing the Monroe family lawyer to ensure she receives no claim to assets. Photos of Catherine and Daniel on dates taken during weekends. He claimed he was working in Birmingham. And last, but certainly not least, a marriage license for Catherine Beckman and another man, filed in Florida just 18 months ago and never legally dissolved. Catherine reached the altar just as I stepped into the aisle. Whispers began instantly. Some thought I was an assistant, others a guest who'd gotten lost. But then, Diane saw me. Her face blanched in a way that made her pearl necklace suddenly look like a noose. She stood quickly, mouth forming the words, "Get her out." But I beat her to it. I object. The music faltered. The officiant froze. All heads turned toward me. Daniel blinked, confusion cracking across his face like a windshield hit by a stone. "Leah," he breathed. I didn't wait for permission. I stepped forward, projecting my voice like I had rehearsed for days. I'm sorry to interrupt. Actually, no, I'm not. You all deserve to hear the truth before this farce goes any further. Gasps rippled. Some of you know me. Most of you don't. I'm Leah Emerson, seamstress, small business owner, and, until a few weeks ago, the fiancé of that man right there. I pointed to Daniel, whose face now resembled melting wax. Catherine turned to him slowly, visibly shaken. That's not, he started. Don't lie, I cut in. You told me you were working late, that you needed space, that your family would come around. But they didn't need to come around, did they? Because they had a better plan, one that never included me at all. I turned to Catherine and held out the envelope. You should probably take a look at this before you walk down the aisle with a man who cheats, lies, and apparently forgot to mention that you're still married to someone else. Her hand trembled as she took the papers. What? She whispered. That's not. He said it was processed. Oh no, sweetie, I said quietly. It's not. And you can thank your ex-husband's sister for helping me dig that up. She was very helpful. Apparently, he's still waiting on back alimony. The crowd erupted. Eli's cameras caught everything. Judge Beckman's sputtering denial, Diane Monroe's attempt to stand and shout me down, Daniel turning pale as a ghost in the Georgia heat. You people tried to erase me, I continued. You lied, manipulated, threatened me into silence. But you forgot that people like me, we don't need your money. We have truth. And the truth spreads. I turned to the guests. You're all witnesses now, not to a wedding, to a revelation. And I hope you remember this day, not for the venue, or the catering, or the headlines, but for what it really was, a warning. Then I handed the envelope to the officiant, looked one last time at Daniel, the man who had whispered promises into my ear while setting fire to my future, and said, I loved you, and you almost convinced me I was disposable. But I am not disposable. I am the last woman you'll ever underestimate. I walked out of that ceremony in complete silence. No one tried to stop me. Behind me, Eli's footage was already uploading to the cloud. Behind me, Catherine was sobbing. Diane was arguing with her husband. And Daniel just stood there, exposed, powerless, and suddenly, very, very alone. The fallout wasn't immediate. Not at first. For a few days. There was just quiet. The kind of eerie stillness that comes after a house fire, when everything's still smoldering and no one wants to acknowledge the foundation is gone. I didn't hear from Daniel. I didn't hear from Catherine. But I did hear from the florist, who had been blacklisted by the Monroes after booking a gig with me last year. Her message was short, just a screenshot of an anonymous Reddit thread titled, The Savannah Wedding That Imploded, Insider Info. It had 1 million views. The top comment said, If I ever cheat, I hope my ex doesn't bring evidence to the ceremony like this queen did. That's when I knew the story was out. Eli had uploaded a cut of the footage online, with names blurred, voices distorted, just enough to protect us legally, but leave enough breadcrumbs for anyone in town to know exactly who was involved. He titled it, Silk and Secrets, A Seamstress's Story. Within 48 hours, the full version was leaked by someone else, uncut, raw, and merciless. The video showed Diane Monroe's face contorting in horror, Judge Beckman shouting for security, and Daniel stammering, I can explain, over and over like a scratched record. It was Glorious. The consequences unraveled quickly after that. Catherine's first marriage, still legally binding in Florida, became public record. Her ex-husband gave an interview on a podcast the very next week, claiming she'd ghosted him after draining their joint account and never signed the divorce papers he paid to file. She told me her new fiancé was a doctor, he said. Didn't think he'd be the type to fall for a fraud? The wedding was officially voided. The Haven at Bloomfield Ridge removed all references to the event. And Judge Beckman? Let's just say the Judicial Ethics Committee doesn't take kindly to undisclosed family interference and slander against whistleblowers. But the part that struck deepest was Daniel. He didn't fight back. No denial, no public apology, just a sudden withdrawal from the hospital board, an automatic out-of-office reply on his email, and whispers that he'd taken leave for mental health reasons. Someone told me he went to Colorado for a retreat. Someone else said Mexico. I didn't care. I'd stopped checking. What I did care about was the letter that showed up 3 weeks later. Typed, signed, from Diane Monroe. It was one paragraph. Your actions have humiliated a family that gave you every opportunity to elevate your station. I hope you find satisfaction in the ruin you've caused. May this be the last time our names ever share the same sentence. Diane Monroe. I laughed, out loud, alone in my workshop. She still didn't get it. She still thought I wanted a seat at their table. What she failed to understand was, I'd built my own. And the difference was, my table had no velvet rope. As for my business, it flourished. People rallied. Former clients left glowing reviews. Local news reached out for interviews. Young brides sent messages like, I picked you because you don't just stitch dresses. You stand for something. Even the Art Council, the same one that removed me from their installation, reached out to make amends. I declined. Some invitations aren't worth revisiting. And then, quietly, something unexpected happened. Catherine messaged me. A short, stilted DM. No apology, just, I didn't know about the other women. Not really. I thought I was the upgrade. Turns out I was just the next version. I hope you're okay. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't need to. We were both pawns. The only difference was I stopped playing. One afternoon, I walked through the boutique with a tape measure in one hand and my mother's handkerchief in the other. I'd framed it, hung it above my fitting room mirror. Beneath it, a quote I stenciled myself. No one gets to unwrite your story. Not if you're holding the pen. Peace doesn't come with fireworks. It comes slow, like the way morning light softens a bruised sky or how rain smells after it's washed away a summer storm. For me, peace arrived on a Tuesday. I was pinning the hem of a bride's dress. A girl named Kiara, sweet as honey, fresh out of med school, the kind who giggled nervously when I handed her a mirror. She looked at herself and whispered, Do I really get to look like this? I smiled. You don't just get to, you deserve to. And I meant it, because every time I helped a woman feel worthy in her own skin, I healed some small part of myself that had once been made to feel less than. After the wedding scandal, life didn't catapult me into luxury or fame. I didn't write a tell-all. I didn't move to LA or take interviews with podcasts thirsty for scandal. I stayed right here in Savannah. I repainted the walls of my boutique, switched out the light bulbs, bought new sewing machines with the deposits from my next season of clients. I built forward, quietly. Eli, true to form, got offered a freelance gig with a national docuseries called Truth and Tull. He turned it down, said he was done filming other people's damage for a while. Instead, he launched a creative collective offering pro bono services to underfunded Black-owned wedding businesses in the region. We still talk twice a week, sometimes more, never less. He brings me coffee. I threaten to charge him for overtime when he lingers after closing. And sometimes, when I'm folding lace and he's adjusting lighting on his camera, it feels like the whole world has slowed down to give us space to breathe. I haven't seen Daniel again, not in person. Though once, about 6 months later, I received a small envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photograph, just one. It was of us, at my mother's grave 3 years ago. I'd forgotten the moment until I saw the image. I was kneeling, lighting a candle. Daniel was behind me, hands resting on my shoulders. We looked ordinary. In love, maybe. Or maybe I just wanted it to have meant something. On the back of the photo was a single sentence, written in his handwriting. "You never deserved what I became." No signature, no address. Just that, and I'll admit, I cried. Not because I missed him, but because I grieved the version of myself who used to believe loving someone hard enough could make them choose you. I let the tears come. Then I tucked the photo in the bottom drawer of my desk and left it there, exactly where it belonged. In the past. A few weeks ago, something happened that reminded me why I never regretted telling the truth. A young woman named Danielle walked into my boutique. Quiet, shoulders tense. She told me she was getting married, but hadn't told her family yet. "They don't approve," she said. "They think he's beneath me." Her voice broke when she added, "They want me to marry the man they picked, the respectable one." I just nodded and pulled out a dress I'd been saving, hand-stitched, simple. Soft pearl buttons down the back. She tried it on and stared at herself in the mirror with a look I recognized all too well. The look of someone trying to believe she still had a say in her own story. "I saw your video," she whispered. "The wedding one. You were so brave." I almost denied it. But then I remembered. This is what transformation looks like. Not just surviving, inspiring. I smiled. "You don't have to burn your whole life down to be free," I told her. "But you do have to stop living inside other people's expectations." She bought the dress, paid in full. And before she left, she hugged me so tightly it startled me. "Thank you," she said, "for reminding me that it's okay to walk away from something everyone else thinks is perfect." That night, I stood alone in the shop, lights dimmed, the sewing machine humming behind me like a heartbeat. And I thought about my mother, about the woman who taught me to cut fabric with care and stitch every seam like it might hold someone's life together. I thought about Diane Monroe and Judge Beckman and all the people who told me I didn't belong. And I thought about Daniel, the boy who didn't know how to tell the truth unless it was too late. They didn't break me. They sharpened me. And now, I shape stories with my needle. I give women armor disguised as silk. I remind them that softness is not weakness, and that no one can silence a woman who has learned to speak her truth with her whole chest. I don't need revenge anymore. I have peace, and peace is louder than anything they ever tried to say about me.